Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of M365 Voice. I'm Sarah Haase.
And I am Mike Marani.
And I'm Antonio Mayo.
So excited to come back, and we're talking about Microsoft Viva today. I wanted to talk to everybody about Viva Pulse, which is, I believe, the very latest Microsoft Viva product to be released. They just released it to customers worldwide, generally available on July 18th, 2023.
Just last week.
Yeah, just heard about it.
Yeah, have you all heard about, or should I maybe stop and cover a little bit about what Viva Pulse is and what it's intended for?
I think you should. Yeah.
Okay. And if we're going to talk about Viva Pulse, I also am going to talk about Viva Glint, which is not out yet, but they kind of, in my mind, go hand in hand as a micro and a macro of the same idea. So many of us that have worked for large organizations are familiar with this idea of an employee satisfaction survey. Might happen annually, semi-annually, quarterly, but for large organizations, I think many of us are familiar with taking these employee sat surveys and then taking action on them. And Viva Glint is really a Microsoft Viva effort to have those broad spectrum employee satisfaction surveys. So I would call that more of a macro survey tool with the ability to dive into analytics of the survey feedback and then action items, right? Okay. Viva Pulse is more of the micro. So Viva Pulse is the ability for managers, project leaders to request ad hoc feedback from either people that work with them or for them to be able to understand team needs, take actions to be able to improve team dynamics. And the great thing about Viva Pulse is with this ad hoc feedback, Microsoft has really built in pre-populated and research validated questions to make it easier for managers to build effective ad hoc, relatively small scale surveys point of time to get feedback. And that's the idea behind Viva Pulse.
So with Viva Pulse, I think you've said this, but it's like individual managers and leaders that would build those forms and surveys and then push them out to their teams. Is that who would use it and how they would use it?
Correct. So Viva Pulse is really meant, and Microsoft says and we can provide a link to the actual Microsoft news article where they announced Viva Pulse, but I'll use their words. They say Viva Pulse empowers managers and project leads to easily request regular confidential feedback so they can understand their team dynamics and how they feel. So I think it's going to be for managers who have direct reports, but also potentially for project leads to be able to gather cross-functional feedback and data. So I think it will be open in both directions. I don't know. I think that there's a lot more to be learned about all of the capabilities of Viva Pulse, and even as employees, whether or not we can use it to gather feedback. But that's what the news article says, and we can make sure that we link to that when we share out this episode.
So can you, aside from having some templates, already baked templates, we'd call them, available for the managers to use, can they have their own, can they write their own, survey?
Yes.
Or do I have to use only the one that provided by Microsoft?
You can do it either way.
Okay.
And because we're up to the second here on M365 Voice, and when I mean up to the second, I mean up to the second, I have Viva Pulse enabled in Microsoft Teams. Do you want me to share my screen and we can do sort of a live, unprepared, unscripted demo where we're gonna move around inside of it and see what we can figure?
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Live demo, living dangerously.
Live unscripted demo just for all of us here. It's like, it's amazing. Sarah. So we're totally going to do this thing. Okay, so here we go. Let me know when you can see my screen.
It's up.
Boom. Perfect. So here we are in Microsoft Teams. So of course, Viva Pulse is part of the Viva Suite. Just to cover from a licensing perspective, you would need to be a Viva Suite customer in order to get Viva Pulse. So it's not going to be part of the enterprise licensing for M365. You've got to be part of the Viva Suite, I believe. I don't think that you can buy it just as a one-off product.
Okay.
So when you come in here, you can basically, you have the dashboard where you can get started by basically sending a pulse or trying to get a pulse on different things. So it's got some level of templates out here to try and determine kind of where your focus is on what kind of a pulse that you want to get. And when I started taking a look at this, I know that I went in to send a pulse. And it kind of walks you through the information about requesting feedback with research-backed surveys and aggregating the results. So when you go in for managers and leaders, get feedback from your director of reports or organization with these templates. And you can focus on different templates to start with. One of the ones that I already tried working with was the whole idea of well-being, which is, I think, a great one. I think that we've been much more focused on this in the last 3 or 4 years, where we want to take a pulse on how our team is doing and maybe feeling about the work at hand, work-life balance, all of those pieces. I think manager focused is more on how I as a manager could serve my team, hybrid working experience, team member success. So defining essential needs may be related to work, product, or goals, and then change management support.
Nice.
Which one do you want us to take a look at first?
I like the well-being one personally.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so we're going into well-being. Now, here is where it's interesting. And I like that they actually surface this important warning that your organization may have policies governing appropriate survey questions for employees. So make sure that you've consulted any such policies before proceeding. I actually love that as a commentary because I think not all managers are going to be familiar with what they can and should not be asking about related to employee well-being.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a really important, it says important, but it is a really important statement. Our company in particular would, I think, have a hard time with individual managers or leaders choosing their own questions without, getting some direction from HR or from our policy department. I know a lot of companies would be like that.
Yeah. So I think what you have to start here is they basically have 3 questions inside the template that are already available for you, but you have the ability to edit any of these questions. So question 1 being, I'm able to cope effectively with work-related stress. And I think that these are those research-backed questions that Microsoft talked about along with the answers. The second one is, I am treated fairly at work. And the third one is, I'm satisfied with my ability to choose when and where I work. But if you go in to edit any of these questions, you have the ability to change the question, the scale, or even any follow-up question options, follow-up question text. So you can even have branching out based on what people answer to be able to ask them additional questions. And you can change any of these default questions, but then you can add a question of your own. So you can ask a rating, multiple choice, or an open text question, which is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to
types of questions you've got.
And I think that this works a lot like kind of Microsoft Forms, and that they really make it pretty easy to be able to say, what is the question that you want to ask? And say, do you have suggestions on how leadership can support your well-being at work? I don't know if that's a good question or not a good question, but then they have the ability to say, get help writing questions. And then it's got some tips and tricks for actually how to word it.
That's cool.
I would say in that I always recommend users to start with a template. And then even if you have to change 50% of the questions, you are 50% ahead at a time. Then you don't have to start anything from scratch. This is really good in this example here.
So then I have the ability to edit the different questions. And then what's interesting is once you get done with deciding, hey, these are the questions that I want to ask, then you go to next. And now it's time to finalize your request. So now I have to start adding individuals to this request. And when I went in and started doing this, right, if I have a couple of individuals and I want to type a personal note, please give me your feedback and thoughts. And send, I actually, it gave me a prompt saying add at least 5 people to protect confidentiality. So I like the fact that they're adding in an automatic thing that they don't want you to necessarily send a Viva Pulse. In fact, it won't let me send a pulse to less than 5 people because they want to make sure that if you're getting responses from only a few of those people, if I only send it to 2, that I would be able to identify the feedback based on the individual. So you have to send it, I think, to at least 5.
Okay, so that was my question here is when you send the pulse, when they would get the feedback actually from the pulse, is it anonymous? Like, am I getting do I know who answered the pulse?
That is great questions. That I'll be honest, Mike, I haven't had enough time to play with this to be able to really determine that. I think that when you do get survey participation, you can see, according to the screenshots and the news articles that we'll share with the session, you can see who you invited and you can see response rate, as in 10 out of 15 people provided feedback. And then you get the ratings on the questions. I do not believe that you find out who answered the survey. I think that's why they want more people in there.
Exactly. That's what prompted my question.
I believe that that's the way it works, but with it just being released 8 days ago, right, there's some of that I haven't personally been able to experience yet.
I was going to ask a question that I think you've already answered, but it might be worth summing up. Like, how is this different from Microsoft Forms, from you just going to Microsoft Forms and creating a form and sending it to people?
I think that's a great question. Microsoft Forms, you could go in and create a form or a survey and send it out to your team at any time to ask them whatever you would like to. And it's really broad reaching. I think that the value behind Viva Pulse is the ability to help your managers and your project leaders to be able to build intelligent questions that are frankly, especially with the recommended template questions, and then the help with the wording, that are going to be better written questions to get more authentic feedback. And then according to the Microsoft news article that we can share, it actually automatically sort of abstracts the data. So Microsoft Forms, you can see who responded and what their answers are. I think that the level of abstraction of being able to summarize your results, but not necessarily down to the people. And then I think that Viva Pulse can also help you track, once you get survey responses, action items related to what action that you want to take as a follow-up on that. So I think it's really stem to stern, really a facilitated product that helps you create the surveys, send them out, facilitate responses, get you the analytics, and track the action items. It's really an end-to-end solution for ad hoc, literally getting a pulse on where your team is.
Very cool. I think you said earlier that the questions are research validated as well, which is really helpful.
Exactly. I wonder if it has any AI capability. Let's say I got invited to for the well-being, and I answered very negatively about the way I am performing my work. It's been sent to my manager as anonymous. Does it have any AI in the background to say, you have responded in this way? Some changes have happened. Do you feel the same way again, or does it require the manager to send another pulse?
I think the idea is that you would send another pulse. I think it's a point in time. From everything that I've read and that I understand, I think it's a point in time. Although it does say in the Microsoft article that managers and team leads can track progress over time, and that Viva Pulse will have suggested next steps based on feedback results. So what those suggested next steps might be, if Viva Pulse, and I think I can only assume that it'll provide recommendations that those might be enriched over time to be able to say, hey, maybe you should send out another pulse at some point in time, maybe in there. And I haven't had the chance to like fully test out all the way to the end of that process, but that's supposed to be built into the product, which gives you a lot more than you have in Forms, where you could send a form, but then it doesn't help facilitate what you do with the results.
Okay.
And is Viva Pulse always accessed here from within Teams?
The whole idea behind many of the Microsoft, the Viva products, I believe Viva Pulse, yes, I believe. But I stand to be corrected as we learn more.
And I think you talked a little bit about this at the beginning. It might be worth summarizing again. The difference between Viva Pulse and Viva Glint.
So Viva Pulse is really I call it the micro version. That's the way I like to think about it, because it's really for people managers or project leads to be able to basically send ad hoc surveys, point in time, to be able to get a pulse on how a team or employees are doing. Viva Glint is more around that overall kind of employee satisfaction surveys and being able to determine how your employees are doing at large. So Viva Glint is all about really accelerating the ability to engage, retain, and attract talent. So those are organizational-wide surveys, dashboards, and then action items to be able to follow up on that. So and I think Viva Glint will have a tie-in with Viva Insights, if I'm remembering correctly, to be able to tie into behavioral data and have that tie in, I think, with a layer of abstraction about not identifying specific users, but in general to see how, from an organizational perspective, your users are working. Now, Viva Glint, I know that I heard a lot about and saw demos of back in May 2023 at in Las Vegas when we were at the M365 conference. At that time, I believe it was announced that Viva Glint was going to GA summer of 2023. I haven't been able to find anything in the roadmap about it recently, so I would say check your Microsoft roadmap. I'm not exactly sure when Viva Glint is going to be coming out, but it'll be in the Microsoft roadmap when it does. Very cool. Or before it does.
Fair enough. What rules do you need to set up the Viva Pulse? Is it similar to other Viva suites, like a global admin or a Viva admin role? Or
great questions, and I'll be honest, Mike, I don't have those answers off the top of my head. I do know that if you have the Viva Suite license, it should be out there and generally available as of July 18th, but good questions. I don't have the answer.
Okay.
The way you were talking about Viva Glint, Sarah, I assume that that's targeted more at like a centralized HR team that would create these organization-wide surveys.
That's my understanding. Yeah. Okay. Versus Viva Pulse is more managers or project leads being able to create and send out things. So that's why I say macro versus micro.
Yeah. Got it. And I love this idea of Viva Pulse because, like, as a people manager, what I have found over time, and you guys might have found this as well, is the larger your team or organization grows, the more your position kind of moves up, the further away you get from people that are doing a lot of the actual work. And it gets harder and harder to, at least for me, to know how people are doing, to know if they need help, to know if they're struggling, if they've experienced the right amount of stress or the wrong amount of stress, or if they're feeling good balance in their work and life or harmony in their work and life. It gets harder and harder to figure that out or to get that info. I think this is something that could really help that.
I think so too, although I also am wondering if as we look at managers and leaders in organizations, right? And how well an organization does at helping to educate its leaders. I wonder if this is going to be exposing some of the haves and have-nots in terms of leadership skills, right? Where you might have leaders who are naturally more likely to send out a Viva Pulse and use it effectively and use the research-backed questions and ask good questions and seek feedback, versus you might have more challenged leaders, I'll say, that maybe aren't good about asking that or aren't good about asking for feedback. So I do think Viva Pulse is great, but I do think that it's in the best interest of organizations to invest in their leaders and to help them understand how Viva Pulse could really help them to be able to get feedback and utilize it effectively and to make sure they're asking good questions.
That's a great point.
So interesting things. So I think we're going to come back and circle back to talk more in the future about Viva Pulse and Viva Glint, but exciting news for summer 2023.
Sure.
Awesome.
Great demo.
Love it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope you join us again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.